We're starting a new series called Jesus Where I'm At, and really asking the question, is Jesus relevant to where I'm at today? And I'm going to help you see the absolute relevance of Jesus and his teachings to the things that you are dealing with every day, and especially now that we're in this COVID-19 pandemic. So I sent a text to your leaders and I asked for words to describe kind of where you guys are at and how things are going. And I was really encouraged to hear a lot of great things were happening. There was a lot of words that were hopeful and like refreshment and things like that. And then there were words that I would totally expect, like discouragement or disappointed, unmotivated, and bored. And so I kind of took those lists and I've come up with about 5 messages where we're going to describe the relevance of Jesus in each of those kind of conditions. And today we're going to start with boredom. Now what's interesting is when I started, there is no mention of the word boredom in the Bible. There's words like laziness and idle. It means like not motivated to do things or just not willing to work. And maybe that's where you're at too a little bit, but we're going to save that for a different conversation. Today is about boredom, and the way I'm going to kind of define it is when you lack ambition. You are disinterested in the things that you actually have. Like those things aren't exciting you. And maybe the things that you are excited about are things that you don't have, or right now you don't have access to. And so you just kind of like lack purpose and you're just trying to figure out like, what am I going to do with my day? I really want to show you today that I think our boredom is a blessing. I think the boredom that we're going through right now is a blessing. And here's why. Because I think it's what's happening in between a breakdown and a buildup. So let me explain what I'm talking about. God is breaking our lives as we've known it. He's breaking it down and he's ready to build it up. But in the in-between time, there's this sense of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. Now, let me help us walk through this. This is exactly what God is doing in saving us. In fact, the word redemption, it kind of has this idea fit into it. And the word really starts with the main story in the Old Testament, the Exodus story. These are my props. I guess I should explain what I'm doing with Legos, okay? These are different lives built on different foundations, okay? So if we're gonna go to the Egyptian life, all right? The foundation of the Israelites when they're in slavery in Egypt is idolatry. They are controlled by an evil king named Pharaoh, and he has made them, in the culture, worships false gods. So they're worshiping Pharaoh as king, as kind of like a son of God, and they're worshiping these statues that kind of represent these false gods that exist out there. And their whole life is just kind of a disaster. You know, the way they get food and the way they work and the way they do family is just harsh, and it's controlling, and it is miserable. And they've been there for 400 years. They're crying out for God, please redeem us, save us, or ransom us out of this situation. And God comes in and just totally dismantles their whole life. Like takes out the idolatry and the Pharaoh, and now he's led them out of Egypt, and they're on their way to a new land called the land of Canaan, or the promised land. And the in-between time is called the wilderness. Some of you guys are familiar with this. I think we did a series on being in the wilderness, or a camp on it recently. And in the wilderness, God is going to rebuild their life, like reshape it in the way that he wants it. The creator of the universe designed humanity to live a certain way. And in a relationship with now the Creator, the Israelites have the privilege of rebuilding their life in the way that God wants it. Now, the excitement of leading Pharaoh, he does these miraculous signs and he wipes out the Egyptian army in the Red Sea, and the waters open up and they pass through, and now they're on their way. But how many weeks or how many days until hundreds of thousands of people sleeping in a desert, people don't start to question, what in the world are we supposed to do with our lives? Like we're kind of just living in tents on our way to a new land that God has promised us, but we really don't know how to do life. And it's interesting that as Moses is up the mountain actually getting the instructions from God on how to put together a new life, the people are bored and they don't have purpose, they don't have motivation, and they start to grumble and complain against God, and they start to rebuild their lives, and they start with the Egyptian idols. They start with the only thing they know to do. The foundation of our life that Pharaoh taught us is to start with a golden statue. And then from that golden statue, we begin to build our lives back the way we're familiar with. And these people, although they've been freed from Pharaoh, start to think, I knew where I got my bread, and I knew how to work, and I knew how to do family, and I knew this system, even though it was miserable. And they don't trust God to rebuild something new. And so I think there was probably, in the middle of the wilderness, a lot of boredom. And I said, this is what God does, because it's not just what he did in the Exodus, but it's what he does when he sent Jesus. That all of our lives are kind of built on these idols, and we end up with these weird, strange looking, distorted lives where we're stressed out and we're running ragged and everyone's busy and there's broken relationships and we're not taking care of ourselves, and things eventually are just not working because the foundation of what my life is built upon is wrong. Here's what Jesus says. He says, why do you keep calling me Lord, Lord, when you don't do what I say? I will show you what it's like when someone comes to me, listens to my teaching, and then follows it. It's like a person building a house who digs deep and lays the foundation on solid rock. When the floodwaters rise and break against that house, it stands firm because it is well built. Jesus is saying when we listen to God and we do what he says, it's like we've dug down through the soft soil and we've built a solid foundation that can't be shaken. When the storms come and the floods come, your life will not be shaken when it's built upon God and Christ and his teaching. And so we're going to do this new foundation, okay? I'm going to put a cross here, and then I'm going to show you kind of what a rebuild looks like, all right? Here's our new foundation. We know that we're in the in-between of God breaking down this old life and building up a new life with him. And so we're going to start with the foundation of Christ. Now, what does it look like to build upon that foundation? I think Jesus says it in here. He says, you come to me, so we come to Christ. And that's us in the morning with these challenges, going to be with him. Come to Christ. The second thing is we listen to his teachings. That when we read his word, he's giving us the instruction. He's the shepherd that's teaching us, that's leading his sheep into the full life. And so we listen to those, but we don't just listen to them. He says, and then we follow it. So these challenges are built upon, if you look how they are, they're read, then it's a think, which is the listening part, like, Lord, what do you want me to do with this? And then the last part is the act it out. And when you do this morning after morning and week after week and month after month, now you get to talk to God about school and scholarships and college and say, what place does this have and how do you want me to go about it? And we start to put the building back together and we go, sports. Okay, I was doing sports crazy over here. What does sports look like with a foundation of Christ? And I ask God, how do you want me to do it? And I start to lay down sports in a healthy way. And my family, my siblings, and how we get along. And I start to put together all the elements of this old life. How do I eat? How do I do relationships? And who am I friends with? And I start to build on this. And then through the weeks and months and years and seasons of your life, God will rebuild you into something better, something that is made in his image. You are his workmanship, and he's promised to complete this project. But here's the temptation when we get bored, to be like the Israelites and say, I don't really know what, so I'm just going to get busy, and I'm going to rebuild this thing, a different version, but it's really the same old thing, where I start with the idols, and I build my life, and it becomes this distorted, stressed out kind of mess. Jesus says, anyone who hears and doesn't obey is like a person who builds a house right on the ground, on the soil, without a foundation. And when the floods sweep down against the house, it will collapse into a heap of ruins. Guys, if our lives are built on possessions, like what we own, nice things, pleasure and what we get to experience, and making a name for ourselves, like popularity. These are the idols of our culture. It's the pattern of the devil. And when we get something like COVID-19, it is, gosh, that foundation, all of those things, our possession, our health, our reputation, everything is just kind of like crumbles. The blessing is, in this crumbling, we come to Christ. And in the in-between, he becomes our foundation. And he gets to be the architect that rebuilds us in the way that he wants us. Guys, do your challenges. The challenges that I give you are thought out. They're about coming to Christ, listening for his voice and what he says, and then acting out and doing it. And I know you're going to reap the benefits and bear the good fruit that comes from that. I hope you guys are well. I'm praying for you. I'm thinking about you. I'm going to send it back to Jesse.